Linguistics expert David Crystal remembers his school days.
Yes, I had my secondary schooling in Liverpool in the 1950s. Arrived in Liverpool in 1952 from Wales and left Liverpool to go to university at the end of the decade. Well, the 50s were, of course, an amazing decade as far as popular music was concerned. People with long memories will remember Lonnie Donegan and his skiffle group from the early 1950s. And, of course, 1965, Bill Haley and his Comets with Rock Around the Clock. And everywhere around the world was trying to emulate these guys, of course, and Liverpool was no exception. In fact, Liverpool was one of the great places where suddenly everybody wanted to be in a rock group. And I was no exception. The secondary school that I went to, we were playing in the school orchestra, and therefore we had instruments at our disposal, and 5 of us got together and formed a rock group which we called the Zodiacs. And we started to play. We rehearsed. I played the saxophone because I used to play the clarinet in the school orchestra, you see. So I moved on to the saxophone. There were a couple of guitars, keyboards, and a vocalist. Called ourselves the Zodiacs, and we started to go the rounds, like everybody else was doing, playing the school halls, first of all school dances and things like this, church halls in the area, and there were dozens of these all over the place. There was a circuit that people started to go on, and entrepreneurs realised that this was a very good way of bringing in some money, so they would put on evenings where the local Liverpool rock groups would be invited to come and play. 10 minutes, a 10-minute set, then some other group would come on, then you'd be back for another 10 minutes perhaps, and you'd end up at the end of the evening perhaps with £5 or something like this. Huge amount of money for penniless teenagers. Remember, we're only 16, 17 years of age. And of course, on those visits around the school halls and the church halls, like St. Luke's in Crosby, were a group of unknowns, totally unknown people, which decided to call themselves the Quarrymen. We all know who they are now. They eventually transmuted into the Beatles a few years later and became hugely famous. My little group didn't transmute into anything, unfortunately, because it was made up, as I said, of schoolboys. We were all doing our A-levels as we... in 1959, in the spring of 1959, we looked at each other and said, if we all pass our A-levels, we're going to go to university and break up. If we don't pass our A-levels, we'll stay together and become famous and go on the Carol Levis show and go to Hamburg and do all the things that we know the Beatles and others did. Well, unfortunately, a couple of us passed our A-levels, including me. The drummer didn't. The drummer was younger than the rest of us, and he stayed on and actually went into the pop music profession, Dave Lovelady. And he ended up playing in other groups and eventually joined a group called The Foremost, who ended up having a hit record. So I was very cheesed off about that. But still, you know, I ended up with my career. I sometimes wonder if I'd certainly made a lot more money if I'd gone the other way. But for a brief 2-year period, I was quite well known in Liverpool because ours was the only group to have a saxophone. You know, nobody else had a saxophone, but we did. So we could be more like Bill Haley than anybody else. So yes, I've had women crying for my body and so on, you know, in those days. Yeah, I wish.